You learned it very young, before you had words for it, before you even knew it was something you were doing. You learned that certain feelings were better kept inside, that the room got uncomfortable when you cried, that your anger confused people, that your sadness made the people you loved look away. So you did what any small, intelligent person does when the environment sends a clear message. You adapted. You became very, very good at looking fine. And here you are, still doing it. It doesn't look like a wound from the outside. People who knew you then probably called you mature, easy, such a good kid. They didn't know those were descriptions of a child working very hard to take up as little emotional space as possible. Maybe the emotions weren't safe in your home, not because your parents were monsters, most weren't, but because they were overwhelmed, or because feelings in your family were treated as weakness, or because every time you expressed something real, the response was dismissal. You're being too sensitive. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. We don't talk about those things. So the feelings didn't go away. They went underground. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, the habitual, often unconscious act of blocking emotional expression before it reaches the surface. And when it begins in childhood, it doesn't just stay a habit. It becomes architecture. It becomes the structure of how you move through the world. Developmental psychologist John Bowlby spent decades studying how early attachment relationships shape the way we regulate emotion. When a caregiver consistently fails to respond to a child's emotional signals or responds with frustration or silence, the child learns to deactivate those signals, to stop sending them, not as defeat, as survival. Bowlby called this an avoidant attachment pattern. The child becomes self-contained, calm on the surface, a small, sealed vessel moving carefully through an unpredictable world. Here is what that child deserves to hear. You were not emotionally unavailable. You were emotionally unprotected. There is a profound difference. You did not lose the ability to feel. You developed a very sophisticated system for keeping your feelings out of reach of anything that might punish them. That system worked. It kept you functional. It kept relationships intact. It kept you from falling apart in rooms that didn't know how to hold you. You were not broken. You were brilliant in the only way available to you. The cost of that brilliance is what we need to talk about. Here is what happened inside your brain. The brain has an emotional processing center called the amygdala. It detects threat, encodes emotion, and fires signals through the body. In a responsive environment, those signals complete a cycle. Emotion arises, it's expressed, it's received, it resolves. But in an unresponsive environment, the prefrontal cortex, the rational, controlling part of the brain, learns to intercept that signal before it becomes visible. It learns to say, not here, not now, not safe. Neuroscientist James Gross found that habitual suppression does not eliminate emotional experience. The feeling still happens internally. The body still activates. The heart rate still rises, but the expression is blocked. And over time, that blockage has a cost. Gross's research showed that chronic suppression is cognitively expensive. It uses mental resources. It creates a constant low-level tension in the body and mind. People who suppress regularly often report feeling numb, not because they feel nothing, but because they've become so skilled at interruption that they can no longer easily locate what they actually feel. The signal still fires, they just can't find the source anymore. So how does someone who learned to hide begin to find themselves again? Not through force, not through performing vulnerability before it feels real, through something slower, something the nervous system can trust. Psychologist Dan Siegel calls it name it to tame it. When you can label an emotional experience, not just I feel bad, but I feel ashamed, or I feel afraid of being overlooked, the prefrontal cortex and amygdala begin to work together rather than against each other. Naming is not the same as expression. It asks nothing of anyone else. It's a private first step, just sitting with a feeling long enough to give it a word. If you grew up suppressing emotion, your access point to feelings may not be through thought. It may be through the body. Therapist and researcher Peter Levine found that unprocessed emotional experience lives in the nervous system as physical tension. You don't need to understand a feeling to begin releasing it. You only need to notice where you feel tightness, what your breath is doing, what happens in your chest when you think about something difficult. The body is honest, even when the mind has learned to edit. You cannot rewire attachment patterns alone. The research is clear on this. Psychologist Sue Johnson demonstrated that the brain updates its emotional templates through relational experience, not through insight alone. You need at least one person person in whose presence you practice allowing a real feeling to be visible, not performing vulnerability, not oversharing, just allowing yourself to say, I'm struggling with something, and letting another person respond. The nervous system learns safety the same way it learned danger, through repetition. At some point, the child who wanted to cry stopped waiting for permission. That child did not vanish. They waited. Psychologist Tara Brach calls this the trance of unworthiness, the deeply buried belief that your inner world is too much, too inconvenient, too fragile to be seen. Part of healing is mourning not just what happened to you, but what you had to do to survive it. The feelings you filed away, the moments no one witnessed, the version of you that kept going quietly when going quietly was the only option. That child deserved more. Letting yourself feel that is not weakness. It is the beginning of repair. Somewhere along the way, you may have learned that emotions are destabilizing, that they make things worse, that other people can't handle them. Psychologist Brené Brown's research on emotional courage shows the opposite is true. People who allow measured emotional honesty report stronger relationships, lower anxiety, and a more coherent sense of self. Expression is not collapse. It is communication. It is you, finally, taking up the space you were always entitled to. You are not someone without emotions. You are someone whose emotions were placed in a very secure container a very long time ago by a child who had no other choice. That container kept you safe. It also kept you separate from other people, from yourself, from the full texture of being alive. You don't break the container. You open it slowly with someone you trust, in moments you choose, on your terms, for the first time. That child learned the rules of a room that no longer exists. You are not in that room anymore. You are allowed to feel things here. You are allowed to be affected. You are allowed to need. That is not regression. That is the oldest form of courage there is. The emotions you hid were never wrong. They were simply waiting for a safer world. You can be that world now for yourself.